Hello, everyone, and welcome. Some of the stories we have for you right now. A frightening incident at Toronto's Pearson International Airport.
Just landed. Our plane crashed.
A commuter plane comes in for a landing and ends up on its roof.
I feel like Lewis and Clark on the first frontier, like I'm fighting for my life.
Winter overture, extreme cold grips the prairies. Atlantic Canada gets walloped.
I will never accept any decisions between the United States and Russia.
Ukraine left out in the cold, snubbed by the U.S. and Russia for peace talks.
Scores! Connor McDavid with the opening goal for the second straight game.
What's on the line with the championship game as goal?
Ladies and gentlemen, the only Canadian who wasn't in Schitt's Creek.
Last 50-year salute to SNL, the laughs, the music, and the shout-out to Canada.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
Well, we begin with an extraordinary landing incident at Toronto's Pearson International Airport. A small commuter plane, a CRJ 900, lands upside down on the runway. Now, here are the images of the Delta Airlines plane traveling from Minneapolis to Toronto, sitting on its roof as emergency crews respond to the crash on the snowy runway. You can see fire trucks swooping in quickly. All arrivals and departures were shut down at Canada's busiest airport, and that is where we find CTV's Kamal Karamali. Okay, Kamal, I have to ask you first about the condition of the passengers. Do we know how many on board and how they're doing?
Yeah, more than 70 on board, Sandy, and we've heard 15 have been injured. Most of them, as you can see from those images, were able to walk away, but we know 3 have been taken to hospital in critical condition, 2 adults and 1 infant or child in critical condition as well. As for the status of the passengers here, there is obviously growing frustration. I want you to take a look at the right of me here. You can see a lot of people who have just been waiting for hours now with no idea what happens next. They've been told by some airline staff that flights have just been suspended to hang tight. Others have been told no, they're canceled to go home. So people are just waiting in limbo here, uncertain of what to do next, including yours truly, who was supposed to be flying out today, but that clearly did not happen. Our flight, suspended and now canceled earlier today.
Okay, now, Kamal, I know it's too soon to say what the cause is, and we're not going to speculate. There will be a joint investigation by the U.S. and Canada. Looking at the weather at the aircraft, you were there. What were weather conditions like at the airport?
Yeah, very, very windy, to say the least, Sandy. Look, it's, you've seen it this weekend. It was a snowstorm in parts of southern Ontario, and then we saw a big snow dump earlier this week. So there was already a backlog of flights, a lot of cleaning up to do, and now this major wind event, it felt like, that was really just, blowing people back. And it's, once again, as you mentioned, too early to speculate. But while we were sitting here waiting to hear what is happening, the first thing we heard was that all arrivals and departures have been suspended because of the wind, and then we heard that there was a plane crash, so it could have been a combination of the two. Once again, too early to tell, but that is what people here and staff are speculating.
Okay, Kamal, thank you so much. And Kamal is at Toronto's Pearson Airport, of course. And Toronto is digging out after 2 back-to-back winter storms delivered a lot of snow, with crews running out of places to put it. Snow as much as 50 centimeters fell on parts of Ontario and Quebec over the weekend, and it could take weeks to clear it away. Now, Atlantic Canada is getting hit today with snow and strong winds making travel hazardous. And in Western Canada, the big story is the bitter cold. And if you look at the map, the blue represents the extreme cold, the red where it's snowing. CTV's Sarah Plowman is in New Brunswick, where it snowed overnight. And Sarah, whoa, look at that.
Sandy, this giant mound of snow in a parking lot is symbolic of what we're seeing across the region. We've seen snowfall after snowfall with little reprieve and fewer places to put it. It's good news for people who make money off of clearing that snow, like one snowplow driver I spoke with today, who's worked some really long shifts lately. He says this snow is heavy. The ice pellets built up quickly last night, but the weather has caused travel headaches from Ontario to Atlantic Canada. There's a lot of delayed or canceled flights. I met multiple families at Fredericton's airport today whose flight was out of Moncton today but was canceled, so they drove 2 hours to fly out of Fredericton instead, only to have that flight delayed. In Halifax, road salt is difficult to find. Toronto has been hammered by 3 storms in 8 days. The GTA is seeing as much snow now as people there saw all of last year. Montreal saw 75 centimeters fall in 4 days, a record for that city. Walking through it isn't easy.
I feel like Lewis and Clark on the first frontier. Like, I'm fighting for my life. I'm going to like a cafe to study because all the libraries are closed.
It's also been cold and windy, and so even after the snow falls, it's not melting, it's just blowing around and drifting. Even after you shovel it, it might just blow back exactly where you pushed it from. Sandy.
Okay, Sarah, thank you. Western Canada, in the meantime, as we said, is suffering through a deep freeze from Alberta through Saskatchewan to parts of Manitoba. It is so cold that if you factor in the wind chill, some cities will reach minus 50 degrees Celsius. Now, that is cold enough for exposed skin to freeze in 10 minutes. CTV's Alison Bamford is in Saskatoon, where it's a balmy minus 40. Hope you're bundled up, Allison.
Sandy, the key is to dress in layers, but sometimes that's not even enough. Behind me was supposed to be filled with families playing hockey, going down the ice slide, and hanging out in the snow park. But even an event called Winter Shines couldn't handle the extreme cold, and frigid temperatures forced most activities inside. A few braved the cold, some because they had to, others because they wanted to enjoy the day off outside.
Got a dog, so we gotta go out. Yeah, gotta get out.
This morning felt quite cold, but yeah, now that the sun's out, it's good.
Still getting used to cold weather, you know, it's a lot different than Ireland.
We were here last year and we thought, why not try it again? And she loves the slide.
Most of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba are dealing with extreme cold warnings. Several communities experienced record-breaking cold overnight, which killed batteries and left some stranded. But what's bad for drivers has been great for business.
A lot of stuff not starting, not running. A lot of dead batteries, people locking keys in their cars, trying to warm them up.
Most of February has been bitterly cold across the prairies. The people we spoke to are trying to make the most of it, but many are eager to get to spring. Sandy?
Okay. Thanks, Allison, me among them. Okay, let's bring in CTV Atlantic meteorologist Kaylin Mitchell to zero in on the cold in the west, snow in the east, and what's next. Kaylin.
Thank you, Sandy. Well, beginning with the frigid conditions, extreme cold warnings out for large parts of the prairies, even to areas of Ontario. Now, there will be some improvement in that situation moving through this week. Alberta improving Tuesday into Wednesday, followed by southern areas of Saskatchewan through the end of this week and southern Manitoba as we move into and through the upcoming weekend. In the meantime, in the eastern half of the country, it was those back-to-back winter storms. The second one, once again, bringing in some snowfall totals and in some cases exceeded 20, 30, even up to around 40 centimeters of snow. Now, that second storm system has dropped most of its snow at this point, but continues to bring in a risk of some snow squalls through parts of southern Ontario and areas of Atlantic Canada over the next 24 to 36 hours. Now, I know it'd be the most Canadian thing ever to have a hat trick of winter storms. Thankfully, an area of high pressure moving out of the prairies. Looks like it's going to keep the next storm system to the south and east of much of the country. Maybe need to watch for it in eastern Newfoundland near the end of this week. Sandy.
All right, Kaylin, thank you. Heavy snow and whiteout conditions are an issue south of the border as well. More than a dozen vehicles were involved in a crash on a major New York State highway this afternoon. It is not yet clear how many people were injured. And devastating flooding in Kentucky killed at least 11 people over the weekend. A mother and her 7-year-old child among them. More than 1,000 people had to be rescued from raging waters.
This is one of the most serious weather events we've dealt with in at least a decade.
Weather officials say life-threatening cold will stretch across the U.S. in the coming days. Well, the U.S. and Russia are holding peace talks in Saudi Arabia on ending the 3-year war in Ukraine. And that's not going over well with President Volodymyr Zelensky, who's not invited. He says his country won't accept the outcome without being involved. The European Union is also excluded and holding an emergency meeting in Paris. CTV's Alex Karpa is in Manitoba, home to Canada's largest Ukrainian community, who are closely watching these developments. Alex.
Sandy, Tuesday's meeting marks a pivotal step by Washington to move U.S. policy away from isolating Russia, with the hopes that U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin meet face-to-face in the near future. But it's not sitting well with Ukraine. Tuesday's talks follow a phone call between Trump and Putin in which Trump said they agreed to start negotiations for a peace deal immediately. This has sent Kyiv and its allies scrambling amid concerns that the U.S. and Russia could negotiate a peace deal without Ukraine and Europe. France called an emergency meeting of EU countries and the U.K. on Monday to decide how to respond. Shortly before the meeting, French President Emmanuel Macron spoke with Trump, but the details about the 20-minute conversation were not revealed. The U.S. has said it wants European peacekeeping troops to enter Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire or peace deal, which is under discussion by European leaders. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer on Sunday said he is prepared to send British troops to Ukraine if there was a deal to end the war. Now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed Monday that he is traveling to Saudi Arabia on Wednesday, though he stressed his visit is not linked to the Russia-U.S. peace talks. Zelensky confirmed Ukraine was not invited to participate in the upcoming talks, and it won't recognize any peace deal that doesn't include his country.
I will never accept any decisions between the United States and Russia about Ukraine.
Ukraine is going to have to make some concessions, but you don't negotiate at the beginning by giving away all your bargaining chips, which Trump seems to have done for Russia. And they're going to have to give away something, but at the same token, they're going to have to get something in return, and that is security guarantees.
Putin has demanded Ukraine withdraw its troops from the 4 regions Russia illegally annexed since September 2022, and has demanded that Ukraine never join NATO as part of peace talks, demands that Ukraine, of course, has rejected. Sandy?
CTV's Alex Karp in Winnipeg. Well, something to smile about now on this Monday. Canada went up against Finland today in the 4 nations face-off and won the high-stakes winner-takes-all hockey game. Everything was on the line today for the matchup, which ended with a 4-3 victory that earned Canada a spot in the final against the Americans. CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Shimvia Beauchemin is with us now. Jen, you know, this was a much-needed bounce back from that devastating loss to the U.S. on Saturday. Now everybody's looking forward to the matchup again on Thursday. Talk to me about this and what people are saying about the victory.
Oh, certainly, as you were saying, lots of smiles here in this room at this bar here where people were watching the game after the heartbreaking loss on Saturday night. And there was excitement. I mean, the game started. It was a must-win game, as you said, and the game started. And very early on, Canada was doing really well. Within 46 seconds of one another, Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon both scored goals within early, and then within 5 minutes of the second period, it was already 4-0 from Canada. And so a lot of fans were just, you know, sort of taking it all in stride, enjoying the day, watching the game, talking about how the game was going to be great on Thursday night. And then all of a sudden, near the end of the game, Finland started scoring. And we had, with about just over a minute left in the game, it seemed as though it was a 1-goal game before Sidney Crosby finally scored an empty netter in that to seal the deal here and to book Canada's flight to this title game in Boston, the title fight, we might call it, for these two teams, because it's such a bitter rivalry as we saw on Saturday night. But fans are looking forward to it. They say it will be a very, very exciting moment. Here's one of them had to say to me.
That's just going to be the big one, right? So.
Did you expect this tournament to be this exciting?
Well, not sure, because we never experienced a 4 Nations Cup before, right? So at the end of the day, I think it's great for the NHL, it's great for the players, it's great for all the fans, and it's just certainly exciting for sure.
Now, Now, there was a little bit of pockets of booing the Canadian national anthem in Boston today when the game started. Nothing like we saw here at the Bell Center on Saturday night. Now, it's going to be an exciting rivalry between the two games, an exciting game to see on Thursday night, Sandy.
Thanks, Jen. And a correction, score 5-3. I misspoke before. We got to give Canada that extra goal, right? Okay, thanks so much, Jen.
Empty netter.
Coming up, it's Saturday night.
It's Saturday.
How a cultural icon is marking a big birthday. Deadline day for Liberal leadership hopefuls to hand over their final entrance fee installment that gives them the privilege of running in the race to replace Justin Trudeau. CTV's Rachel Aiello is here with who made it across the finish line. Rachel?
Sandy, all 5 hopefuls have secured the funds needed to stay in the race, but there are 2 big tests still on the horizon. With 20 days to go, the lineup of candidates looking to replace Justin Trudeau is solidifying. Representatives from the campaigns of Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, Karina Gold, Frank Baylis, and Ruby Dalla have all confirmed their final entrance fee installments have been or will be made by the end of the day. And while it's a 5-person race at this stage, the rival Conservatives are already honing in on who they see as the frontrunner.
The Conservatives, for all intents and purposes, have told Canadians Mark Carney is the one to beat.
It got support from... Still working the U.S. airwaves over the weekend, today Freeland unveiled her 10-point housing plan in a statement. Freeland is promising to cut municipal red tape and tie the number of new immigrants to the housing supply. Baylis also released on paper today his plan for Canadian energy security. Candidates will be squaring off on their stances on policies such as these in Montreal next week. The party is holding 2 leadership debates, in French first on Monday and then an English debate on Tuesday. In such a condensed race, political analysts say the candidates fighting Carney for the spotlight will have to walk a fine line.
If he is the clear frontrunner, if he may be sitting in the Prime Minister's chair in just 3-4 weeks and he's confronting the challenge of Donald Trump and Pierre Poilievre, how hard do you, as a Liberal rival, want to go at him now?
The party has told me that by meeting today's payment deadline, the 5 candidates will be eligible to be on the ballot and on stage for those debates, which will be moderated by 2 former journalists. Sandy?
Thank you. Still ahead, we'll talk a little bit more about addressing Canada's housing crisis, how uncertainty over U.S. trade relations could put a wrench in some of those plans. Liberal leadership candidate and former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland pitched limiting immigration today as a solution to Canada's housing crisis. We heard that earlier in Rachel Aiello's report. Now, that promise came on the same day new data showed that housing projects are up, but there's still uncertainty. CTV's Paul Hollingsworth explains why.
The rate of home construction continues to climb in Canada, but trade risks add significant uncertainty, according to Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation.
There's a need for more housing.
The annual rate of new housing construction projects, factoring in the seasonal adjusted annual rate, jumped 3% in January compared to the previous month. However, the 6-month overall national trend declined 2.5% last month. Communities with at least 10,000 people saw a 7% increase. This housing expert says these numbers offer a mix of good and bad news.
The glass half empty part of it is that housing starts haven't increased as much as the federal government would have hoped.
In Canada's 3 largest cities, Montreal posted a 112% increase in housing starts compared to 12 months earlier. Vancouver was up 37%. Toronto dropped 41%. CMHC's Tanya Barassa Ochoa says Toronto's sluggish condominium market has caused an overall slowdown.
So there's a lot less projects that are, breaking ground.
Experts say the threat of tariffs could deliver a major blow to home construction and the housing market in general.
If some regions have heavy reliance on certain industries, for example, that could have an impact on unemployment, for example.
There is currently a wait-and-see approach at play in our country. If higher tariffs are imposed, that could lead to another round of inflation, which could cause a drop in home construction and purchasing at a time when there is a housing shortage in Canada. Sandy.
Oh, thank you. After the break, a star-studded celebration. SNL marks 50 years on the air. SNL, a cultural touchstone with a huge Canadian connection, marked its 50th anniversary this weekend and was celebrated with 3 star-studded events. Now, it is the creation of Toronto native Lorne Michaels, who helped launch the careers of so many Canadian comics. CTV's Andrea Case shares the laughs and the music.
Saturday Night Live has been home to comedy and music for 5 decades, old and new. And what would SNL be without the monologue? And 79-year-old Steve Martin was given the honor.
Good evening, and welcome to the 50th anniversary of Saturday Night Live. I'm Steve Martin, Saturday Night Live's newest diversity hire.
There have been 894 hosts in 50 years.
Ladies and gentlemen, the only Canadian who wasn't in Schitt's Creek.
But you know, wait a second. I thought we were hosting together.
Oh, do you have your passport on you?
No.
ICE, get him!
No! Oh, cooperate! Don't take me! I'll name names! Mike Myers, Jim Carrey,
The show brought back popular skits and a slew of former cast members.
You know what? I think we might be related.
I don't see it.
No, I don't. I got a lot of answers.
Somebody talking about coffee?
And even Oscar winners.
A good mother can also be a bad girl.
Saturday night on a Sunday night. This one was for them and us. Andrea Case, CTV News.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Omar is here later, and we'll see you tomorrow, we hope. Bye for now.